Hi, I'm Matthew Herzberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. This is your weekly check-in for all things inspiration, education, and motivation on your path towards success with myopia management. And this episode, we're continuing our Road to Vision by Design 2025 series. I have on with me Dr. Dan Press, and he's going to be talking to us about his lecture coming up at the conference called Myopia and the Whole Child. And if you don't know, Dan, he is super big into vision therapy and myopia management. He's a nationally recognized expert in vision development therapy. He served the Park Ridge community since 2012 and is a leader in pediatric vision care, myopia control, and binocular vision. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to you about this lecture and learn more about you, because there's this thing that happened when I first interviewed Paul Levine. He has an associate at his practice, so he's the myopia guy, and his associate is the vision therapy guy. And
John Abundanza.
Yes. And I made this comment about the difference between the two specialties, and Paul corrected me and said, VT is essentially myopia management. And I've been on this tear to put this question towards my guest about the relationship between VT and myopia management. But first, I wanted to learn more about you, preview your lecture, and then talk about these different subjects, if you're up for it.
Sure. Yeah. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I know I just threw a lot at you.
Yeah.
So start us out. How did you first get into myopia management?
So I'll start a little bit before that in terms of getting into optometry, because I think it sets the stage that I'm a third generation optometrist. So my grandfather, my father, and myself have all graduated from Pennsylvania College of Optometry. And my father is heavy into vision therapy. And so when I was choosing my rotations through my third and fourth year of optometry school, I wanted to get as much exposure to different vision therapy practices as I could. So one of those opportunities came about by going to California and working with Dr. Gary Edding, who is in the Los Angeles area. And he's also a big heavy hitter in vision therapy. Well, he shared office space in Santa Monica with a doc named Dr. Stu Grant.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Grant, if you're familiar with the history of ortho-K, is often credited with being the father of the overnight version of ortho-K, because prior to his approach, it was really used as a daytime treatment, and people would be able to get some correction from taking off lenses towards the end of the day. And with the advent of the newer materials with the higher oxygen permeability, Dr. Grant felt that this was something that could be done overnight safely, and then that has been proven over many times since then. Well, because they shared office space, about 1 or 2 times a month, I had the opportunity of working with Dr. Grant as a third-year optometry student.
Wow.
So for those 6 months, I got to experience his amazing expertise in fitting these ortho-K lenses. There was no topographer in his office. He would just use a manual keratometer. He would take a central K and then move it to the periphery. And then he would go in his back office with his refraction data, and he would just design these lenses on his own without using any software, without using any consultants, and definitely not using any pre-manufactured ortho-K lenses. So that piqued my interest in this. And when I graduated in 2007, I worked with my father in New Jersey. And because of that experience, he thought it would be a great marriage, like you had just said about vision therapy and myopia management, to add it to the services within the practice. And so from there, as a graduating fourth-year optometry student, had very little confidence that I was going to be able to do this on my own. So he hooked me up with Dr. Nick Despotidis. And
Yes.
Those of you know that Dr. Nick is a powerhouse in myopia management and is one of the top people in our field. And because he also practiced in New Jersey, he was gracious enough to allow me to come observe him as often as I wanted. And so I was the very fortunate experience of working with him and Dr. Barry Tannen and their colleague, Dr. Ivan Lee. And I got to learn a little bit more about myopia in the real world. And, my father kept asking me, so when are you ready? When can I send you your first patient? I've got these myopia patients ready to go. And I said, I need a little bit more time, need a little bit more time. And he's like, Dan, you've had enough. You know enough. Let's just do this. So he threw
Yeah.
me into it by putting that first patient in front of me. And I started working with ortho-K lenses back then in 2007 and haven't looked back since.
Wow. That is amazing. I mean, to have these touch points with these key figures, in our industry, especially Stu Grant, like from my limited experience with him, like this larger than life guy, very kind person,
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh, what a gentle soul.
yes, and it's a shame that more people don't know about his legacy. I want to do an episode. I'm thinking about doing an episode. I want to have Mark Cosgrove on this episode as well. You should
Hmm.
come on too, where we just tell stories about Stu Grant and how great he was, because
Oh, yes.
one of the biggest figures, if not the biggest figure for overnight ortho-K for sure.
Yeah.
Tell us about your first like couple of patients doing ortho-K, myopia management. How did that go for you? You had said your dad was like, "You're ready, let's do
Right.
this." So how
Right.
did that go for you?
Completely nerve-wracking, just in optometry school, and I think that things have changed obviously since 2007. Even then, we didn't get a whole lot of exposure with gas permeable lenses. So when you're on your own and you're designing these specialty overnight gas permeable lenses, and you don't have a mentor in the office that necessarily has had a lot of experience, it could be very nerve wracking. So we started with trying to hit those home run patients, under a -3 with an average K no flatter than 42. And it thankfully worked out really, really well. Those first few patients showed some great success with the working with consultants. I wasn't designing my own lens. I couldn't pick it up from Dr. Grant that well. But those first few patients had very successful outcomes, and at the time, it really was there was myopia control. There wasn't really myopia management.
Hmm.
Atropine was not very well, not commonly used. We certainly didn't think of soft lens multifocal as a myopia management intervention. So it was purely an ortho-K specialty. So, but the statistics, I mean, that was like I feel the hotbed of the time of research coming out in that late
Right.
2000s in terms of how well this works at controlling and limiting the progression of myopia. That just getting those first few patients under my belt really served to increase the confidence, and then you build from there. And for people that are just getting started, I feel like yeah, what my father did was the right thing with this.
Yeah.
Just start.
Yeah.
Don't waste another day. Get into it. You pick those patients that are decent candidates, and you're thankfully with the lens designs that we have available. I mean, you're gonna have 90% first fit success.
Right. That's such a great point. Like, the practice I grew up in, as I guess the equivalency would be a myopia coordinator, like a staff member. We had to work on patients for 5 years before we saw a conversion. And thankfully,
Right.
it's not that way anymore. There's so much more tools and resources available, but there's some sort of missing ground, I think, between the two generations of how modern optometrists have to learn how to do this and incorporate it into their practice. When you were first working with your first patients, how did you position it? I know this was a while ago, but like, I did you have the same issue that we did, where it's like you had to work on patients for this extended amount of time, or what was that like?
Yeah, I think that again, I just have been so fortunate in my life and so grateful for the people that I've been able to work with and work around and learn from, that it was a little bit different because I wasn't starting this on my own trying to recruit patients. So when you
Yeah.
have somebody like my father who, has written 3 textbooks and was the chief of vision therapy at SUNY and before that at PCO, and just a pillar in the community of not just our town, but within optometry itself. When he says, this is what you should do, go see Dr. Dan, and then they end up in my
Yeah.
chair. I honestly am so spoiled that I didn't have to work too hard at selling it in terms of being able to educate patients on why this is so important and why this can be so helpful. So for me, I mean, I recognize that it was not that as challenging as it is for other people that are just starting out more on their own. I give those people a lot of respect for being able to convert those patients. But it was a little bit easier. But at the same time, you still have to educate parents and patients on the process
Yeah.
because we still hear it. I still, every time we propose this to a patient about you can wear these lenses overnight and you take them out in the morning, you see clearly all day without glasses or contacts, and they look at you cross-eyed like, what? That's
Right.
a
Yeah.
thing? So, there's still definitely a lot of patient education that is a part of it. But in terms of my early experiences, when those patients were in my chair, they were pretty much ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're just as big into VT as myopia management, maybe more into VT, but like in my circle, I know you from myopia management and VT, right? So
Hmm.
talk about the VT element of your practice, and I want to talk about myopia and the whole child, your course, because I think a lot of your expertise in both of these categories has helped shape this lecture, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure, sure has. So, what's interesting, the way that I see it from my history of working in this field, and what is 2007 and 25 was that 18 years now, which is hard to believe, is that when I'm working with colleagues in myopia management, it almost feels that historically you come from two different places. You come from a contact lens background, right? Those are the people that have been very comfortable with ortho-K and they're fitting these ortho-K lenses, and that's their intervention with myopia. And you have others that come from more of a vision development and vision therapy background. And those folks that have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience within vision therapy and vision development look at myopia typically as more of this developmental challenge with handling near point stress. And versus coming from it more from a contact lens background, then you're going to think of it more as a dioptric or even axial length finding that we need to be managing over the long run. So, and I firmly believe that if you're seeing pediatric patients and you have a vision development emphasis, you're going to see a lot of patients developing myopia over time. So, from my perspective, in terms of transitioning to, and I'm happy to get into more questions about the crossover between the two, but to the lecture and the lecture title of myopia and the whole child, it's more that the emphasis of what we read about, which rightfully so, we need to be concerned with, is the progression in regards to axial length and refractive findings. But that's not why we do this. I mean,
Right.
I feel like you ask any optometrist, why they are practicing, why do they bring in myopia management? And if we keep peeling that onion, almost everyone is going to get to the same answer, which is to improve the quality of life of the patient that's sitting in front of me. So if we're talking about improving the quality of life for the patient in front of you, I still don't hear a whole lot about the impact of the environment. I know that we pay lip service to that.
Hmm.
I don't hear a whole lot about binocular vision. I don't hear a whole lot about accommodation. Actually, I shouldn't even say that. I do hear a whole lot, and I hear about how it doesn't really impact myopia progression.
Okay.
And that is so unfortunate to me to
Explain
see
why.
that in writing.
Yeah.
So, as an example, I think it was just in July, heavy hitters in myopia management published an article in, I think it was in Contact Lens and an anterior segment journal. And it was on the updates of the 10 things of myopia that we've learned to be true and 10 things that are new that we're questioning, and whatever the title was. And again, these are the heaviest hitters in myopia that published this. And there was one aspect about accommodative lag. I think they threw in binocular vision, but it's been proven that it does not have a significant impact in myopia management and myopia progression. And somebody reading that would say, "Oh, they looked at this Comet study, which was done, in the late '90s, early 2000s, and they found that progressive lenses don't really slow down the progression of myopia." And so the indication from reading the article, they don't say this in black and white, but the inference that you get is don't bother prescribing progressive lenses for your myopes.
Hmm.
But what about just accommodation? What about binocular vision? Would we not want to look into that in terms of how is that impacting our patients? And maybe they would benefit from a progressive lens, not necessarily to slow down the progression of myopia, which by the way it does. And I'm going to peel back the onion more so from the data. in the research that there's a subset of patients that this does help with. Uh, but the fact that you still have accommodative issues that may not be so good for that patient, or they have a near esophoria and a high AC to A ratio for, for all those of us who don't want to think about it, but plus lenses often, if you have a high AC to A ratio, decrease esophoria. Is that a bad thing? So let's zoom out a little bit. And if we are true to wanting to try to improve the quality of life of our patients, let's not just think about this in the vacuum of axial length and dioptric increase. And let's think about it as, what are the demands that this child has? What are the challenges that they're going to deal with? And is there something I can do to help with that? Even if it means that it may not be double blind placebo matched research that shows me that it's going to impact their axial length progression.
Yeah, I mean, this really does speak to the difference between the academic sphere and the clinician sphere, right? Because the clinicians are seeing the results right in front of them and are having to make adjustments. And the
Mhm.
academics are saying, well, we need to be able to prove this and we need to be able to do research and study. And I think it's always fascinating when these two worlds start mixing together, especially when it comes to myopia management and everything else in our industry. Let's talk about some of these factors. Like I said, I just want to do a preview,
Sure.
but let's talk about some of these factors. Let's start with like you mentioned, environmental. I
Mhm.
had Ken Mahler on the podcast recently, and he mentioned he's asking questions that typically other optometrists are not asking. Like, is the patient sleeping on their stomach? He needs to know that if he's going to attempt orthokeratology. Are we talking about similar kinds of things when it comes to environment?
I think that for me, I'm not necessarily worried about their sleep position, and credit him for thinking about that in advance. For me, it's more when I reference the environment, it's more that it's. I think it was James Carville during Bill Clinton's first run said it's the economy stupid.
Yeah.
I feel like with myopia progression, it's the environment stupid.
Right.
Meaning that the genetics are what they are, but the environment is going to dictate progression of myopia. And we can argue that from an academic standpoint all day, but it's just clear as day now that the environment is clearly dictating this rapid progression of myopia that we're seeing. So
Mhm.
for me, it's a matter of thinking about that again from an evolutionary lens and from a vision development lens. That I'm going to spoil my opening to this myopia talk. We could talk about an epidemic of myopia, but it's an epidemic of lifestyle. I mean, that's what we're
Mhm.
dealing with. We're dealing with the complete this reversal of how we spend our days as a species, from hunting and gathering. And I'm not prepared to give you an exact figure in terms of what I'm going to use at the lecture, but
Sure.
you think about human development again as a species and how many years we've been developing, and we've had a blip in the radar in time of screens and technology, and we are seeing a rapid change in the evolution of our systems physically in terms of myopia development. We just need to be paying a lot more attention to that and not just paying lip service to that. So for us, our questionnaire for our myopia patients goes into all of that. How much screen time is your child getting? How many hours a day are they spending outside? What does their environment look like? And being in the Chicago area, this as well, that you have a few months of the year where it's really tough to get outside, so we got to take
Yeah.
advantage when you can. And it's also talking about the influence of sunlight, and educating patients kind of next level, not just, hey, spend 2 hours a day, at least spend 2 hours a day outside for your child who either is at risk for or has myopia, but um, what should they be doing outside? Should they be wearing sunglasses? If light's important, how do we manage that? So
Yeah.
for us, we know that for part of this, thinking about this as the whole child, not just with myopia, being outside is important, not just to help reduce the progression of myopia, but it's really important to get natural light to set your circadian rhythm.
Mhm.
You talked about sleep. I would have thought you were going to go down that road in terms of just quality sleep is so critical for human
Yeah.
performance. And we should be exposing ourselves to sunlight first morning sunlight, and evening sunlight during dusk. That has a huge impact on our circadian rhythm, and you should be doing that without sunglasses.
Mm.
So we educate our patients, like, if you're not outside, open the windows, in the morning. We need there's more red light during those times naturally, and we need that during peak hours, especially during the summertime. From 10 to 2, you need to have UV protection, wear sunglasses, wear a hat. But again, this is not just about myopia management. It's about understanding how the environment plays a role in child development, and trying to emphasize that with our patients.
Yeah, yeah. And my role, my role through this podcast in our industry is to ask the stupid questions or the obvious questions because I don't feel like they're
Mhm.
being asked enough. So
Right.
I'm gonna play that. I'm gonna play that role right now because I do a very good job at it. Isn't this just kind of a foregone conclusion? I mean, I've been in practices throughout my time in consulting and working with AOMC docs or whatever the case may be. The issue is never brought up. The issue of outdoor time and whatnot is always brought up, but it's never gone into finite detail like you're describing. In my opinion, that's very rare to see an optometrist actually start outlining these very specific things. It's usually, well, Mrs. Smith, Johnny's got to get outside more, and here's what I
Mhm.
recommend, if they even have a recommendation. So like I'll ask the stupid question of like, isn't this just kind of a foregone conclusion of like, well, of course they should be getting outside more. Where does like the finite fidelity come into this for you? Because what you're saying is fascinating, and I think it absolutely applies.
Mhm. So I can't, I'm blanking on the author that helped me with this, but my Vision Help Group colleagues help with recommending books to read every year for our meeting that we have. And there's one concept that's referred to as the curse of knowledge.
Mm,
And with the curse of knowledge, when you know something, you start, especially the more you hear it and the more that you're surrounded by it, you take for granted that everybody, of course, everybody
right.
knows that spending outside is spending outdoor time is helpful. So I think that we just take it for granted, and that if you mention it, and again, just pay lip service to it to your patient of, okay, here's this myopia patient, or risk of myopia patient. I'm going to just educate that parent, like spend 2 hours outside, limit screen time, which another thing, by the way, that I keep reading published papers, that screen time is not necessarily associated with myopia management or
Right.
myopia progression, but that's the wrong take, in my opinion, to think about it that way. That it under it undermines the importance of it when we just mention it. So
Hmm.
if we are serious about it, then I think that we need to spend more time with it. And in my opinion, I mean, what works for me might not work for everybody, but in my experience, that if we are serious about how important that is for, again, child development outside of myopia progression, then we should spend as much time talking about it as we do with the how ortho-K lens works.
Right.
Why are we putting less weight into the importance of it? And I would argue that from a child development standpoint, it is more important. And if you want to equate importance with time, it is more important to spend the time talking about um, lifestyle when it comes to screen use, and when it comes to outdoor time, physical activity, nutrition, and sleep. It is more important to talk about that than to talk about ortho-K, atropine, soft lens multifocal.
Right.
Now, it's there's only so much time that you have, so I appreciate that. Um,
Yeah.
but I do believe that, again, we if we're serious about it, then we should be spending more time talking about it, and don't assume that your patients know because you mention it on the way out of the exam room, and I doubt it's going to be taken seriously and put into effect.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because, we need to outline for our parents what are the important factors that they can take home and start implementing. And the when you talk about these key aspects of screen time, for instance, like parents know that too much screen time is bad.
Right.
In my experience, and this is just my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but mom already understands there's a problem. And most of the time she kind of feels trapped in it. Like there's nothing she can do about it because her kid goes to school and uses a Chromebook and then comes home and then is on their phone for social media, or is, like you mentioned, during certain times of the year, is being more and more inside. So she already knows this isn't a problem. What she's looking for, in my experience, is an advocate, somebody who can support her and give her actionable things that she can take home to her spouse or partner or whoever in the family, and then start like making a difference in that kid's life. Do you agree with that?
100%. That is exactly what we're hearing. Parents know this, but
Hmm.
like you said, I've got three kids. They're 14, 13, and 11. So prime ages for all of this, for dealing with all of this in my own household. And I see that just the culture is surrounded by being on screens, and their social life is determined by screens with Snapchat and whatever else they're getting into. So the parents, the vast majority of them know that, but they don't know how to implement any kind of policies at home. And they also, like you said, they're looking for an advocate, and they need the child to hear it from the doctor figure, the
Yes.
physician in the room, that this is not good for you, and you need to be taking this seriously. And if you most times that's what the parents are looking for. And I keep coming back to this, but in that particular moment, we could care less about the myopia relationship. They're worried about their child. They're worried about, and this I will go into in the talk, the mental health impact of being
Right.
on screens too much, and the physical issues that you have from being on screens too much. And like you said, they know this. They're looking for that advocate. And in that moment, yes, we'll maybe center it around the increase in myopia and talk to the kids about the negative impacts that high myopia has, but we really are looking at this more from a whole child issue. And when the child hears it from the doctor, they're more likely to comply than when it's just mom or dad.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially when you're talking about the myopia issue, what kind of things are we outlining for them? I have heard from parents. So you're saying that there might be a higher chance for retinal detachments or other things later in life I've got to deal with right now. I mean, the way we used to talk about it with parents was, there is a potential future outcome that is bad for your child's vision. But then you're asking the parents to like transport themselves into the future essentially. And it's much easier, in my opinion, to back up what you're saying, is to give them stuff that they can work with right now. And I think
Mhm.
I think that that's a lot that's overlooked. You talk about nutrition, you talk about exercise, getting outdoors. These are being shortcutted in optometry practices that do myopia management. They're just saying, yeah, well, Johnny or Melissa or whomever needs to get out more, outside more. But what does that look like? Like, are these kids just going outside with their phones? Or are they actually like getting out and interacting with the 3D world? Are they doing sports, or are they like, taking that necessary time? When it comes to screen time again, because I want to go back to this, because you
Yep.
brought up a very good point. Because I've heard Mark Bullimore speak on this. Somebody in the crowd asked him, "Can we tell our patients that it's definitively screen time?" And he said, "No, you can't.
Right.
It's near work. We do not have the data to show that it is screen time." But so much of near work is screen time. People don't read like this. They're on their phones like this. I've seen kids with their phones right up in their face. Can you
Mhm.
speak more to that? Because I think you were alluding to that earlier.
Yeah, I mean the fact, again, the easy way to approach this in the exam room, when you want to be confident in helping that parent be that advocate to get their child to balance their screen time with activities in the 3D world, as you mentioned, you don't have to just worry about myopia. I mean, that's really what it comes down to for me. It's that, do we believe that the current lifestyle, the current visual demands on our children are playing a role in the rapid increase in myopia? The answer is yes. And I'm really happy to hear that Dr. Bullimore, who, again, one of the heaviest hitters in the field of myopia
Yeah.
all time, um, said it's near work, because I don't think I've read that from him. So
Oh,
it's cool
okay.
that
Well, this was a couple of years ago, so maybe I don't know. Maybe things have
yeah.
changed. I don't know, but I that's what I believe I heard from him when he was speaking on stage about it.
Yeah, so it's great to acknowledge that what we're trying to communicate is that when we are just sitting stationary, staring at a screen, that it isn't, or even reading a book, that's the other concern that you have. But the point is that your visual system really functions with two main pathways. I mean, this is going
Hmm.
back to the neurology that we'll talk about too. And when you just are stationary and not using your vision to guide movement, then you're more likely to have problems in the long run. So when we talk to kids about this and parents in the exam room, with screen time, what's really hard is we don't have specific guidelines of exactly how much time we should be recommending for screens for kids.
Hmm.
So I think that's really the most challenging is because parents sometimes want that and they want their kid to hear it from you. And in our general rule, we say the younger your child is, the less screens they should have. And I used to try to come up with different exact time frames based on age groups. The American Academy of Pediatrics had something out there that they've since rescinded because they don't have enough evidence in terms of exact time that we should be recommending. So instead of recommending total time, what I've started to do is again talking more about the balance of time between stationary viewing things up close with movement. So another thing I'll get into in the lecture is about this 2020 rule that we all talk about.
Right.
I don't think it's enough. And that's been shown through a few different studies that, sometimes the longer you're doing near work and the younger you are and the more active your accommodation is, the longer it takes for your accommodation to relax when you just
Hmm.
look away. So what we talk about is no more than 30 minutes of consecutive screen time before you have to move. Just get up and
Yeah.
move. I don't care if that's taking a water break or taking a lap around the room or your desk. Ideally, get outside, but no more than 30 minutes consecutively. I have zero research basis on that if that's going to have any impact. Outside
Yeah.
of it makes good common sense, and I'm a big, big fan of common sense when it comes to understanding the science behind the recommendations that we make. And I find that at least you're giving the parent something to go by. And again, having those three kids at home in this prime age group, 30 minutes to some people might seem like a lot, but trust me, it goes by pretty quick with these kids and
Yeah.
their screens.
Yeah, for sure. Um, are we is there any element to working with the parent directly as well? I had the opportunity to briefly hang out with a therapist in a hotel bar, and she changed the way that I looked at communicating screen time. I'm not an optometrist. I don't talk to parents and patients about this, but I do talk to people in my life about how bad near work and screen time is for kids, and then we need to get them outdoors. I have friends and they have kids.
Right.
What she said, which I thought was fascinating and it's very obvious, was that she said, the parent is often the instructor in this scenario because
Hmm.
in therapy and family therapy, which is her discipline, they have the same problem. My kids are on their phones too much. What do I do about it? And she points to the parent and says, what are you showing your child? Like parents are constantly on their screens in front of their kids. Do we see a future where we're also addressing that for the parent and telling them like, look, you need to lead by example? Are you already doing something like this with your parents?
The short answer is no. I think it is a great idea to bring it up because you're right. I mean, modeling the behavior that we're expecting for our children is important. It's probably not good enough to say, do as I say, not as I do.
Hmm.
So I think that is going to be important. And I think it's only going to become more important in the next 10 to 20 years. If you think about it, we're really getting into the era now where people having children now are the first generation that grew up on screens,
Yes.
right? I mean, my kids, um, I'll be 44 this month, and I had a Game Boy, I think, when I was like 12,
Right.
got a Sega when I was like 13, 14, whatever it was. Um, I feel like we sound like our parents and grandparents, like, in our day, we were outside and didn't come
Yep.
home until mom rang the dinner bell.
Right.
But it definitely was a different world. I was exposed to screens, but nowhere near like what we're seeing now. And I think that if you look at if you're having children, 25 to 35 years old or somewhere in that range, like you are going to start seeing that. And because a lot of these moms and dads that are walking into the exam room, they're the first generation growing up on screens. I think that will become more important as time goes on. But and you make a great point. That's definitely something I'll consider. But I just feel like we're not quite there yet with the parents that
Okay.
I see in my exam room, that they
Yeah.
have I'll call it a screen addiction. Compared to what we might be seeing over the next 10 to 20 years.
Dan, I mentioned before the show I'd screw up the intro, and I did because I forgot to ask you if
Yeah,
anybody wants to get in touch with you online, how could they do so? So let's take care of that now.
sure. The best way is going to be through our practice Instagram page, which is Park Ridge Vision Care. And if you message that, then the team will notify me, and I'm happy to communicate through there.
Awesome. And I forgot to mention at the top of the show, but if you're enjoying this episode, there's actually more waiting for you. We release extended versions of every episode that we do exclusively for our paid supporters of the Myopia Mindset, along with bonus monthly content that you really won't find anywhere else. It's just $12 a month, which is essentially the price of a cup of coffee each and every week. And I like to say, hey, if you would buy me a cup of coffee to talk about myopia management, to have on awesome guests like Dan, and support getting the word out there, because we think myopia management is the greatest thing ever, then please consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. You can do that through our Substack or on our website at myopiamindset.com. Dan, I want to transition to, my earlier question, which was kind of
Sure.
a teaser, because now that ever since Paul said this, when I have a VT person on the podcast, like I had Nate Benia
Hmm.
Warford on recently, I posed the
Sure.
same question to him. So let's talk about it, because I think this is fascinating, the relationship between myopia management and VT. So let's go back to that question when Paul said, realistically, vision therapy is a form of myopia management. Do you agree with that?
I don't think it's a simple answer.
Hmm.
So I'm going to have to listen to your podcast with Nate, because I have a high degree of respect for Nate. I'm really curious how he answered this as well. Um, we do not prescribe a vision therapy program for myopia management. And the reason is that